In the deepest darkness of the Mariana Trench, the ocean floor begins to groan under immense pressure. A sudden, violent fracture splits the tectonic plates, releasing energy equivalent to thousands of atomic bombs exploding. Massive bubbles of methane gas erupt from the seabed, signaling the start of a catastrophic geological event. On the surface, the ocean swells ominously, forming a silent, deadly ridge of water moving incredibly fast. Unaware of the approaching doom, the Shanghai skyline shines brightly under the peaceful and calm evening sky. Millions of people walk along the famous Bund, enjoying the breeze, oblivious to the monster approaching them. Suddenly, the horizon changes shape as a colossal wall of white water rises higher than the clouds. Emergency sirens begin to wail across the city, freezing everyone in a moment of pure, paralyzed terror. The 100-meter-tall wave blocks out the sun, casting a long, terrifying shadow over Shanghai. The Oriental Pearl Tower stands defenseless as the massive wall of water smashes into its concrete base. Glass windows shatter instantly, sending millions of sharp fragments flying into the swirling, dark, and debris-filled water. Giant cargo ships are lifted from the river and thrown like toys into the dense urban jungle. The unstoppable torrent tears through the streets of Pudong, crushing everything in its path with absolute force. Further south in Hong Kong, the narrow concrete canyons are instantly filled with a raging black flood. The massive cables of the Qingma Bridge snap loudly, sending vehicles plummeting into the churning abyss. Desperate crowds try to outrun the water, but the speed of the tsunami makes escape entirely impossible. Entire city blocks are swallowed whole, disappearing beneath the foaming surface of the angry and violent ocean. Cars, signs, and debris are churned together in a washing machine of destruction, erasing all human traces. As the water continues to rise, the lights of the great metropolis flicker and die out forever. This is the story of the day the ocean reclaimed the land and civilization faced total annihilation. 4 hours before the apocalypse, the coast of Fujian province lies under a sky that is impossibly blue. The surface of the ocean is terrifyingly flat, resembling a giant sheet of polished dark glass without movement. Suddenly, thousands of seagulls begin to fly chaotically, their piercing screams tearing through the heavy and silent air. They abandon the sea, rushing madly towards the mainland as if fleeing from an invisible and deadly enemy. Beneath the water, an unusual migration is taking place as millions of fish swim against the strong current. They crowd together at the shallow river mouths, so dense that the water flow seems to be stopped. Experienced fishermen stand on the shore, observing this phenomenon with eyes full of deep suspicion and growing anxiety. The air becomes heavy and charged, causing the hair on everyone's arms to stand up due to static. At Hong Kong's bustling Victoria Harbor, the sea level begins to recede at a dizzying and unnatural speed. In just 15 minutes, the muddy seabed lies completely exposed and bare under the harsh and bright sun. Dead coral reefs and shipwrecks from the last century emerge like rotting skeletons from the drained harbor floor. Tons of industrial waste and plastic, once buried, now lie exposed, emitting a strong and overpowering foul stench. Instead of fleeing, curious people flock to the shore to film and take photos of the strange scene. They are unaware that the ocean is pulling back to gather momentum for a brutal and destructive punch. Thousands of miles away in the South China Sea, ocean monitoring stations are recording wild and impossible signals. The pressure sensors on the seabed are instantly saturated because the intensity of the shock is too great. At the Beijing Seismic Center, scientists stare at their screens with faces full of pure horror and disbelief. The needle on the seismograph draws frantic zigzag lines, going far beyond the limits of the Richter scale. A massive fracture at the Manila Trench has just collapsed, pushing a gigantic volume of water instantly upward. Emergency evacuation notices are issued immediately, but the telecommunications network has already become completely and hopelessly congested. Human complacency in the face of the ocean's fake silence is a certain and signed death sentence. The first tsunami wave does not have a beautiful curled shape, but is a massive, murky block of water. It moves across the deep ocean at the incredible speed of a modern commercial jet plane flying high. Upon touching the shallow waters of the Chinese continental shelf, the height of the wave begins to skyrocket. The wall of water stands up to 50 meters, equivalent to the height of a 15-story residential building. The first point of impact is the nuclear power plant scattered along the fragile and exposed coastline. The camera captures seawater breaching the cooling systems, steam exploding to form a massive white column of smoke. Loud explosions echo, signaling that a double disaster is beginning to unfold simultaneously with the massive flooding. In Shanghai, the fortified breakwater withstands for exactly 30 seconds before crumbling completely into dust and debris. The ferocious floodwaters spill into Nanjing Road, turning the pedestrian street into a raging river of death. The rapid current at 80 kilometers per hour sweeps away every obstacle in its path with ease. Double-decker buses are swept away lightly, crashing into each other, creating the loud sounds of crushing metal. The Shanghai Tower is struck by thousands of tons of water at its base, causing it to shake. Tempered glass on the lower floors shatters, and water pours into the luxurious and magnificent main lobby. Everything inside is submerged in a split second, leaving absolutely no chance for survival or escape. In the south, Hong Kong becomes a completely isolated oasis amidst a vast ocean of salty water. The dense high-rise apartment buildings have now become deadly traps with no exit for the trapped residents. Water rises to the 6th floor, sweeping neon billboards and streetlights into the chaotic and swirling vortex. The pedestrian footbridge is knocked down by waves, falling into the floodwaters, carrying those trying to hold on. This is just the beginning of the nightmare, as nature starts its most brutal and devastating performance. As the wall of water hits the shore, the impact sound is like 1,000 bombs exploding simultaneously. The reinforced concrete breakwater crumbles instantly, ground into fine powder under the immense pressure of the ocean water. Shanghai has no defense left, and the black water floods the city with a frantic and insane hunger. The Oriental Pearl Tower shakes violently, its distinctive spherical structure cracking open under the pounding of the waves. Huge sheets of glass fall from hundreds of meters, slicing into the water surface like giant sharp guillotines. Water fills the wide avenues, turning them into deadly canyons with a fast and powerful raging current. A cargo ship is lifted by waves, crashing violently into a skyscraper in the heart of the financial district. The collision creates a massive explosion, with fire and black smoke rising to mix with the seawater. Hundreds of containers fall onto the streets, crushing everything beneath them like giant, heavy metal toy bricks. At subway stations, water pours down the escalators with the force and volume of a majestic waterfall. People sheltering underground realize their deadly mistake as the water rises rapidly to the ceiling of the station. The air pressure in the tunnel increases suddenly, rupturing the eardrums of those who are still trapped inside. Shanghai's power grid begins to explode sector by sector, creating a deadly chain of electrical fireworks. Darkness covers the city, lit only by flashes from severed power lines dying in the rising water. Cut to Hong Kong, where the mountainous terrain makes the disaster worse and more deadly by many times. Water is compressed into narrow streets, creating a water cannon effect with massive and unstoppable destructive power. The distinctive red taxis float helplessly, like torn paper boats in the violent and swirling floodwaters. The Qingma Bridge, a transport pride, is enduring tension 10 times beyond its designed engineering limits. A deafening metal explosion rings out as the main cable snaps, whipping through the air like a whip. The entire bridge span falls into the sea, dragging dozens of cars trying to escape into the abyss. Czech Lapkok Airport completely disappears under the seawater, leaving only the air traffic control tower visible. Giant jet planes crash into each other, wings shattering, floating like the carcasses of dead metal whales. In the Shenzhen industrial zone, chemical tanks are torn from their concrete foundations by the floodwaters. A toxic mixture of oil, chemicals, and seawater begins to spread widely across the populated residential areas. The water color turns a monstrous purple and green, emitting deadly toxic fumes into the humid air. Survivors on the roof cough into their shirts, trying to cover their noses from the strong chemical smell. In the sky, rescue helicopters circle but cannot land because the wind is too strong and dangerous. They can only look down helplessly at the hell on earth unfolding right beneath their feet. The water rises to the 10th floor, drowning all property and memories of millions of people forever. Once bright advertising signs now flicker underwater, creating a ghostly and eerie light in the depths. The sound of collapse never ceases. Breaking glass, falling walls, and snapping metal echoing continuously. Buildings with weak foundations begin to tilt, slowly collapsing into the water like rotten wooden logs. A domino effect occurs as one building falls into another, triggering a chain reaction of structural collapse. Hospitals and schools, usually safe shelters, now cannot escape the fate of total and complete destruction. Panic-stricken crowds on high ground trample each other to fight for a safer and higher position. Human screams are completely drowned out by the monotonous and cold roar of the rushing water. The tiny rescue efforts of police and firefighters are quickly swept away by the massive flood torrent. Nature is demonstrating absolute power, reminding humans of their small and insignificant place in the world. There is no boundary between land and sea. Everything is just a murky brown color of death. Sharks from the ocean swim into the city, hunting prey among the flooded corporate office buildings. Plastic waste, cars, animal carcasses, and furniture form strange and grotesque floating islands in the water. Ancient libraries and art museums are flooded, wiping out thousands of years of cultural history forever. No corner of the city is spared, as water creeps into every basement and every elevator shaft. Telecom stations on top of the tallest buildings are the last remaining lighthouses in the darkness. But even they begin to shake as the foundations beneath are severely eroded by the water. People huddle together on concrete islands, shivering in the cold wind and overwhelmed by deep fear. They watch their beloved city die, bit by bit, under the overwhelming power of the Great Flood. The tsunami has turned the economic center of the world into a giant and silent water graveyard. And as night falls, the silence of death begins to replace the roaring sound of the water. This is the moment civilization realizes that it has lost the war against nature completely. The world's most modern subway system has now become a cold and silent collective mass grave. Water fills the pitch-black tunnels, where train carriages lie motionless like giant iron coffins in the dark. The entire East China power grid collapses completely, pushing hundreds of millions of people back to the Stone Age. The night without electric lights becomes more terrifying than ever under a sky filled with dark clouds. No internet, no phone signal, survivors are completely isolated in their own oases of pure fear. On the high rooftops, social order begins to disintegrate as food sources slowly run out completely. Violent fights break out over a single bottle of clean water or a rare dry place to sit. The crying of children and the pleading of the elderly echo in the cold and damp air. In the distance, fires flare up uncontrollably, but no one is coming to put them out. Chemical-contaminated water from industrial zones creeps into every corner, poisoning the remaining drinking water sources. The risk of disease outbreak threatens those who were lucky enough to survive the initial physical impact. Elevated highways are broken into sections, forming isolated concrete islands in the middle of the water sea. Thousands of cars are abandoned on the bridges, their owners having disappeared a long time ago. At Pudong Airport, planes are half submerged, their broken wings crashing into the passenger terminal buildings. The Lujiazui Financial Center, the economic heart, is now as silent and still as a ghost city. Billions of dollars in financial data are wiped out as underground servers are flooded with saltwater. A group of people builds a raft from floating wood trying to paddle to higher ground. They must be wary of sharp glass shards and deadly undercurrents lurking beneath the water surface. The darkness becomes thicker, hiding the bodies floating aimlessly on the surface of the black water. Spotlights from helicopters sweep across the water, searching for arms raised in desperation and hopelessness. But the number of people needing rescue is too large. The rescue forces are completely overwhelmed. The buildings still standing begin to emit groaning sounds as their steel structures suffer from fatigue. An old apartment building cannot withstand the water pressure, collapsing into the pitch-black darkness of the night. Witnesses can only hug each other tightly, their spirits breaking before the devastating and cruel scene. The bone-chilling cold of the night seawater begins to take the lives of the weak. All hope seems to vanish until the very first rays of dawn appear on the horizon. Sunlight does not bring warmth, but only clearly illuminates the scale of total and complete destruction. The city that never slept is now immersed in deadly silence, with only the sound of waves. The geographical map has been redrawn forever. The coastline recedes dozens of miles into the mainland. Humans now face a new reality, surviving on the ruins of a once great civilization. The night passes, revealing a completely alien world covered in thick mud and absolute destruction everywhere. The once proud skyscrapers now stand only as bare steel frames against the pale morning sky. There are no car horns or music, only a heavy silence covering the vast urban grave. Survivors step out of the rubble, their eyes looking blankly towards the distant and ruined horizon. Supercars and luxury goods lie scattered in the mud, becoming worthless trash in this new world. Military helicopters tear through the sky, bringing fragile hope to those remaining in the devastated ruins. Humans begin to clean up brick by brick, a tiny effort against the greatness of nature. This disaster is a stark reminder of how fragile our civilization truly is in the end. The sea has receded, but the scar it left will remain forever in human history books. we build again, but the deep fear of the ocean will never disappear from our hearts.